going to stop. He wants to bring lasting peace to Europe.
I will not seek this honor an eighth time. My current term in the Senate will be my last.
A complete lack of judgment, a lack of preparation, a lack of the independence necessary to serve as director of the FBI.
He is not fulfilling his core promise. He was elected to reduce everyday costs. He has done exactly the opposite.
Hello, everyone. I'm Major Garrett in Washington, back here in Washington after a couple of 3 days in New York. Tonight on America Decides. 1 month on the job. Today marks exactly 1 month back in office for President Trump. Here's some numbers. So far, he has issued 73 executive orders. He has spoken with 17 world leaders, held 7 news conferences, and at least 43 times he's taken questions in one form or another from White House reporters. Also, on Capitol Hill, Kash Patel confirmed the Senate voted 51-49 to make Patel the next head of the FBI. Republican Senators Lisa Murkowski of Alaska, Susan Collins of Maine voted no. What Patel's confirmation means as the effort to reduce the size of the federal workforce begins to move toward the FBI. Peace plans today at the Conservative Political Action Conference, or as it's more commonly known, CPAC. Vice President J.D. Vance told those gathered peace may be coming to various troubled parts of the world.
I really believe that we're on the cusp of peace in Europe for the first time in 3 years because we have leadership from the Oval Office, and we haven't had it in 4 years.
We start tonight with Nancy Cordes at the White House, Caitlin Huey Burns on Capitol Hill. Nancy, lots of things going on today in regards to Ukraine, Russia, and ongoing administration efforts. One of the most news-gathering or news-attentive moments is a press conference, was supposed to be a press conference between the Ukrainian president and the president's special envoy. They met, they were supposed to talk, then that was canceled. What's going on?
Right. Reporters there were led to believe that there was going to be a press conference, Major, after Keith Kellogg, the U.S. Special Envoy to Ukraine and Russia, and President Zelenskyy sat and talked. There was a photo op, but then the reporters were told no press conference, time to go home. And they were told that it was the U.S. side that decided to cancel it. We haven't gotten any explanation for why that press conference was canceled, but you could probably guess. There's been some tension between the Ukrainians and the Americans, the Trump administration, at least in the last couple of days. President Zelenskyy was very vocal about his disappointment that he was left out of talks a couple of days ago in Saudi Arabia between Secretary of State Marco Rubio, other Trump officials, and their counterparts from Russia. And so it's very likely that some of those conflicts, and as you know, President Trump didn't take too kindly to what Zelenskyy had to say, that dirty laundry would have been aired in an uncomfortable joint press conference in Kyiv. And so we don't know for sure that that's why it was canceled, but it's probably a good guess.
It's a fair inference for sure. Caitlin, I want to go to you on Capitol Hill. What so far has been the Republican reaction, at least among senators you've been able to talk to, about this rift clearly in public view between President Trump and President Zelenskyy?
You know, it's interesting, Major, because this is one of the issues, one of the few issues that you're starting to see a little tiny bit of daylight between Republicans and Donald Trump, at least when it comes to his rhetoric towards Russia. You've had several Republicans up here on Capitol Hill, including especially the chairman of the Armed Services Committee, Roger Wicker, say very harsh words about Vladimir Putin. He even called him a war criminal, and others have had really, tough criticisms for him. But they're also, Major, willing and ready to give the president deference when it comes to dealing with Russia and Putin especially. So you're not seeing these really heavy-handed criticisms of Donald Trump and his approach. You are seeing more criticisms of Putin. And that also speaks to what this body is contending with, which is a Republican Party base that very much is in the mold of Donald Trump in terms of foreign policy. Covering the campaign, there was a very, there was an eagerness among Republican voters to just get this war over with no matter what. This belief that the U.S. was spending too much abroad and not enough at home, even though they're separate budgets, and just wanting this war to end and placing faith in the president. So while you're seeing a little bit of daylight here, you're really not going to see Republicans, by and large, go out on a limb and criticize the president outright.
Nancy, during today's White House briefing, there were several senior White House officials brought in. You asked about efforts by the Department of Government Efficiency to reduce the federal workforce, and you had sort of an engagement with the National Economic Council chief, Kevin Hassett. How did that go down?
Well, I asked him why, according to our reporting, other news outlets reporting, the cuts at the IRS slated to take place over the next couple of days were slated to be deeper than the cuts that we've seen at most other agencies. According to our reporting, 3,500 people expected to lose their jobs at the IRS by tomorrow, and the numbers could go up eventually over the next couple of months to 6,000. And what Hassett had to say was that basically there's plenty of fat to cut there. He said that there are people who are not fully employed with, don't have enough to do, essentially. There are people who've been working from home, and he said there are always ways to find waste. So, and then I followed up by asking, are you saying that the people who are getting fired had poor performance? Because what we're hearing from a lot of people who've been let go at other agencies is that they've been on the job for such a brief period of time, maybe a couple of months. They haven't even had a performance review, and yet they're being told that they're being dropped for poor performance. And he said, kind of flippantly, oh, well, people who are performing poorly aren't going to tell you that they're doing badly. That's what you're always going to hear. So they definitely believe in this mission. He argued this is still just a small sliver of the overall IRS workforce, which is about 90,000. And so they argue that they can still get the job done with, say, 5% fewer people.
All right, Nancy. And Caitlin, very quickly to you. This was not an unexpected announcement from Mitch McConnell, the Kentucky Republican senator, but it was news nevertheless today.
That's right. Mitch McConnell announcing his retirement after having served in the Senate since 1984. It's a very long time. But today it was really notable, Major, because I was watching from the Senate chamber, and he had many colleagues in the chamber listening to his speech today, including several Democrats. And at the end, they all applauded him, and several lawmakers went up to him and, congratulated him, shook his hand, paid their respects. And the first two to do so were Lisa Murkowski of Alaska and Susan Collins of Maine, the two most moderate senators of this body. And they joked with him about having to put up, essentially, with moderate senators. And then he joked back, saying, well, I guess I'm one of you now. And that really kind of spoke to the way in which Mitch McConnell has been kind of portrayed now in this Trump era. He has voted against Trump's nominees, 3 of Trump's nominees in this time. Now that he's not majority leader, he has been kind of unencumbered from having to, deal with those sort of things. And he kind of alluded to in his speech today that he has a lot of unfinished work to do in terms of that as well.
Caitlin Huey-Burns on Capitol Hill. Nancy Cordes at the White House. Thank you very, very much. Vice President Vance kicks off the Conservative Political Action Conference, better known as CPAC. Our Aaron Navarro will join us next from National Harbor, Maryland, where that is going on. That's next. You're watching America Decides. Welcome back. The formal name is the Conservative Political Action Conference, but everyone who goes and everyone who covers it calls it CPAC, and it's in full swing at National Harbor, Maryland. This is sort of a gathering of all the most prominent figures in elective office and around the conservative movement, and among them today was J.D. Vance, and here is how he responded when asked about the United States' relationship with Europe.
Obviously, we're going to continue to have important alliances with Europe, but I really do think the strength of those alliances is going to depend on whether we take our societies in the right direction. So let's have shared values. Let's defend democracy. Let's have free expression, not just in the United States, but all over the Western world. That is the path to strong alliances in Europe.
President Trump is scheduled to deliver remarks at CPAC Saturday. That's its final day. Aaron Navarro joins us now, and as he does, as I understand it, Aaron, Elon Musk, the putative head of Doge, is on stage. So if you can compete with the Roar or Elon Musk, please do so.
Hey, Major, good to be with you. Yeah, it is striking. Vice President Vance kicked off today, kind of the first big day of CPAC. The crowd was about 2/3 full. Now Elon Musk, right behind me, came out to the biggest applause I've heard here today. And as you talked about how CPAC is kind of the gathering of the Republican Party, it is clear that Elon Musk, through his efforts with the Department of Government Efficiency, through his donations and work with President Trump, is at the center of the Republican Party universe.
At the center, maybe even encroaching on the star power of President Trump. If I just heard you correctly, you said the biggest applause of the day. I'm going to guess some in the Trump inner circle will have an applause meter going on Thursday to compare and contrast.
That's right. And we'll see President Trump here on Saturday to close it out. But, Vice President Vance began everything, as people were still trickling in, getting through security. But certainly you could feel the energy, hear the energy for Elon Musk here. And just throughout the day, as speakers were referencing the Department of Government Efficiency, you heard a lot of applause behind that effort. You saw a couple cutouts of Elon Musk. So when you think about that CPAC scene, it's clear that Elon Musk is kind of ingrained in that now.
And Aaron, summarize the day from what you've heard from the stage. Is the general sense that everything is going great for President Trump and there's no obstacles in the way and it's basically horizons unlimited?
That's an interesting point you made about obstacles. If anything has been mentioned, it's been blame for the past administration. There was a point where they brought up the vote for Kash Patel, who was eventually confirmed as FBI director, and a mention of some of the no votes, including Mitch McConnell, whose name prompted a lot of boos here. But certainly it's a lot of people, one, blaming the Biden administration for what they believe is a failed state of the country right now, but also showing optimism for what Trump has done in this past month when it comes to immigration, when it comes to his threats of tariffs on the global scale.
And Aaron, CBS News has learned that Enrique Tarrio was escorted out of CPAC. Remind our audience who he was and what this is all about.
Yeah, we heard from a couple of the January 6 convicted rioters who told reporters that, in addition with Enrique Tarrio, that they were also kicked out this morning, but were not given a clear reason. A source familiar with the operations here at CPAC told CBS News that Tarrio was booted because of his criminal record, not because of his involvement in January 6. Some of the other January 6 convicts that we talked to said that they eventually got their badge to be able to enter CPAC.
Eventually got their badge. Aaron Navarro, thank you very much. Mitch McConnell says so long to the Senate. The former Senate Republican leader says he will not run for re-election next year. Next, Semaphor's Kadia Goba is here with what we know about McConnell's departure and many other fascinating details about House Republican politics. That's coming up next. You're watching America Decides.
I assure our colleagues that I will depart with great hope for the endurance of the Senate.
Mitch McConnell knows a thing or two about endurance, the longest-serving Senate leader in the entire history of that legislative body. But even before McConnell announced his decision not to seek re-election, something that everyone here in Washington has long been expecting, as you might imagine, a field of potential replacements were already grappling for the earliest advantage. So to talk about that, I want to bring in Semaphor's Kadia Goba, political reporter for Semaphore. So let's run through three names for our audience. I'll give them to you and you can walk us through.
Sure.
Andy Barr, Daniel Cameron, Nate Morris.
Yeah, so Andy Barr is a representative from Kentucky. He is on the Financial Services Committee. he was probably one of the first to kind of allude that he was going to be running about a week and a half ago. Then you have Daniel Cameron, who many say is an ally of the former,
Mitch
Senator
McConnell,
Mitch
right.
McConnell. He was the former state attorney general, but did lose a governor's race recently.
Right to Andy Beshear, right.
That's right. So that's kind of a sticking point for him. And then we have this outsider, Nate Morris, who seems to be talks to people in the MAGA world, which is, I think, is quite interesting. He's sort of an outsider, and I was talking to a colleague of mine who said, you know, outsiders are sort of in style right now. If you look at Donald Trump, he's an outsider.
Business guy looking for the MAGA lane, but maybe has some business issues that might become topical in a primary.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be a tough race. It's going to be this outsider guy against what we presume these two very much established lawmakers who know the game, who understand how this works, who have been, I'm sure, cleaning everything for the past year and a half or so they can get
ready
prepared
for this.
here. That's right.
I mentioned before we went to break that you've got some reporting on House Republicans. All this week we've been focused on lots of other things, not House Republicans, but they're going through a lot of legislative preparations to move the Trump tax cuts and other issues. Where are they?
Well, away in their districts right now, but they will be back next week, and after the president gave them essentially an endorsement over this one big bill, it seems that they are also going to put their version of what the Senate is trying to pass right now on the floor, and that's a reconciliation bill that will pass the filibuster in the Senate. So Congress is sort of at an impasse. The Senate wants two bills.
Right.
The House wants to
approach. The Senate is starting first on something much smaller, much more focused on defense and immigration.
And immigration, that's right.
The House alternative is the whole thing.
Well, they want taxes.
They want the whole thing.
Their issue is they feel like if they get this one bill across with just border and defense, there's not going to be room for taxes because they have some pretty strong fiscal hawks in their conference that they're just like, where are you going to get the money from to pay for these tax cuts? But the implications for people on the ground, if they don't get this passed, everyone's going to have a tax hike.
So a high-pressure week next week when House Republicans return?
I would say so.
What about this nominee from the Trump White House for Labor Secretary? You've got some interesting reporting and analysis on that.
Yeah, Lori Chavez-DeRima. She is
member of Congress,
a former member of Congress, who just lost her race by a Democrat. The seat was flipped. She is, she's one of the rare members that voted for the PRO Act, which makes it easier.
Yeah.
Sorry, that's right. A rare Republican that voted for the PRO Act, which makes it easier for unions on the federal level. No one anticipates that she is not going to, pass muster. She will be confirmed. I think the more controversial people have already passed, like Patel and Tulsi Gabbard. I don't think anybody has a problem with her. And Democrats, she might actually get some Democratic support as well.
And the interesting thing about her is that because she's in favor of this PRO Act, which is sympathetic toward labor union and labor union mobilization, some Republicans might look at her askance, but that's not going to block her confirmation.
I would say it's sort of a pivot for the Republican Party as they try to capture the working class voter.
She might be an exemplar of that.
That's right.
Kadia Goba, Semaphore, political reporter, thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
Now to issues related to the southern border, where illegal crossings, which were declining in the final months of the Biden White House, are at their lowest point right now in nearly 5 years. Our Camilo Montoya Galvez sat down with the chief of the U.S. Border Patrol, Mike Banks.
Given how low the numbers are at the U.S.-Mexico border, are your agents planning to support ICE in carrying out arrests in the interior, for example?
The job of the U.S. Border Patrol is to be on the border to prevent illegal entry. Our number one goal is to deter. If we do not deter them through presence or through consequence, then it is to make an arrest and decide what the person is amenable to under the law and put them into that process.
Banks also told Camilo, quote, the morale of the Border Patrol is going up daily, unquote. With the DOJ axe looming over the FBI, Kash Patel takes the reins there. Next, more on what we can expect from Kash Patel's leadership. That's next. You're watching America Decides. Welcome back. As noted here earlier, the Senate today confirmed Kash Patel to lead the FBI. Patel's nomination approved 51-49. Republican Senators Susan Collins of Maine, Lisa Murkowski, Alaska, joined all the Democrats to vote against Patel. During the process of confirmation, some senators expressed concern that Patel might use the Bureau's power to go after perceived political enemies of the president or the president's agenda. Scott McFarlane, our justice correspondent, joins us now. Remind the audience, Scott, why those concerns persist.
Kash Patel has been among the most loyal and ardent of Trump's surrogates to be nominated for a position, but he's been nominated to run the FBI, which is famously, and its agents say necessarily, independent from the White House. You can't have a White House-aligned FBI director looking out for the White House's interests and also leading law enforcement missions nationwide, protecting the country from terrorism, from gun runners, child predators, and gangs. The concern is about the alliance there. Kash Patel has also been a pretty provocative surrogate for the president. He has been a loyal defender of January 6th Capitol rioters. He's been somebody who said there should be prosecutions of political enemies and the media. And he's also famously had a hit list of sorts, a wanted list in one of his books. All of this is a bit of a confluence politically for Kash Patel, but it didn't slow or stop his confirmation with just those two Republican defections.
And related to this, Scott, I want to ask you about an investigation that has been launched by the newly enshrined U.S. attorney here in the District of Columbia. I believe his name is Ed Martin, and it revolves around some sound bites I want to play for you and the audience. Control room, let's play Chuck Schumer, Senator of New York, first, then the Garcia House member soundbite second. Robert Garcia, please.
I want to tell you, Gorsuch, I want to tell you, Kavanaugh, you have released the whirlwind, and you will pay the price. You won't know what hit you if you go forward with these awful decisions.
What I think is really important, and what the American public want, is for us to bring actual weapons to this bar fight. This is an actual fight for democracy, for the future of this country, and it's important to push back on the chairperson of this committee.
Scott, what's this investigation about, and what's the relevance of those statements we just heard? One from 2020, one from this year.
In an internal memo to staffers, the newly appointed acting U.S. Attorney Ed Martin says he's inquiring into what Chuck Schumer meant when he said those things in March 2020. Also, Congressman Garcia, second-term Democrat from California, publicly released a letter of inquiry, he says he was sent by Ed Martin, about those comments on CNN. About the March 4th, 2020 statements about Justice Kavanaugh from Chuck Schumer, according to a response to Ed Martin from Schumer's staff, the senator cleaned that up a day later, saying he meant no violence or no threats towards the judges. As for Robert Garcia, he's saying he meant no harm and no threats, and that it seems that Ed Martin is trying to chill the freedom of speech of acting lawmakers, which feels a lot like the political rhetoric of 2024 in reverse. I think what's important here to note is that Ed Martin was a Stop the Steal advocate, a person who helped defend January 6th defendants in court. He has an active social media presence, and he is the nominee also, Major, to be the full-time U.S. attorney in the District of Columbia, which is among the most powerful prosecutorial positions in the country. The U.S. attorney for D.C. declined to respond to our request for comment.
And Scott, very quickly, when you and I were in New York, we talked about Governor Kathy Hochul. We talked about New York City Mayor Eric Adams. The governor has decided to limit Mayor Adams' power, but not remove him. What do we know?
The limitation of power is one step the governor could take. She could have done the more declarative, demonstrative thing and start the process of removing him from office. But there's all kinds of pitfalls there, and the clock is ticking. There's a primary in June. There's some type of cutoff date at some point of this criminal case, potentially, if it's dismissed by the judge. The clock was moving fast, though I think Kathy Hochul's decision will please some and displease some, and that may have been inevitable for her decision on this case.
Very much caught in between. A lot of things regarding the mayor, the Trump Justice Department, the Southern District of New York, and underlying New York City politics, which is always, if nothing, fractious. Scott McFarlane, thank you very much. Well, it's fair to say, been a busy first month in office for President Trump. He says it, most of us covering it, we say it. Let's go through some of the numbers, not all, some of them. 73 executive orders in total, which is almost as many as the number of lawsuits that have been filed against his administration. That number currently, as I speak, stands at 81. Our reporter panel joins us now to discuss this and other topics. Sophia Kai, White House reporter for Politico. Tom LoBianco, founder and a national politics reporter for 24 Site News. Sophia, at the podium today, all sorts of adjectives from senior White House officials: most productive, most aggressive, most this, most that. It has been a busy time.
Yes. I mean, I think you can describe it as taking a wrecking ball to the federal government. Even people who expected them to start to do this weren't expecting them to do it with such speed and such a big measure. I mean, a lot of this comes down to the White House saying, pay attention to the president.
Mm-hmm.
They're telling that to the agencies. They're telling that to workers. And, you know, I think that's like the primary message and where most of, you know, the executive orders are falling under. So, you know, number one, immigration. Number two, shrinking the federal government. That's been two of their biggest themes this month.
And Tom, at the podium today, Stephen Miller said, when the president is elected, the president is the embodiment of the American democracy. And when the president acts, everyone needs to heed the directions from the president, including specifically the bureaucracy. In that light, I want to play for you very new sound that comes from CPAC, where Elon Musk is still on stage. And this is him now, just a couple of moments ago, defending the initial efforts of the Department of Government Efficiency, which he more or less leads.
People ask me, what's the most surprising thing that you've encountered when you go to D.C., you know, when you're in D.C.? And I said, well, the most surprising thing is the scale of the expenditures and actually how easy it is to, when you add caring and competence where it was absent before, you can actually save billions of dollars, sometimes in an hour.
Yeah.
Like, it's wild.
There's a song lyric, a future so bright, gotta have shades. Also, I don't think that song goes in a video or anything else with a chainsaw on the carpet, but, you know, it's CPAC, lots of things are allowed. Tom, your reaction?
Equally performative. I just, you know.
High marks there.
I mean, the Constitution has three branches, co-equal and separate, and checks and balances. Now, regarding...
First delineated powers in the Constitution belong to Congress.
Yes. And, I mean, if the executive branch wants to deal with the bureaucracy, okay.
Right.
That's within their purview. If they want to attempt to negate the 14th Amendment, well, you go through the courts.
Birthright citizenship, exactly.
It's not unlike, so Stephen Miller making these comments, this WWE style of, you know, politicking, is not unlike Elon Musk showing up with the chainsaw with Javier Milei at CPAC. I mean, it's very, I should note here, you know, what Elon Musk said on stage is, might be broadly accurate, but what he's put out on his publishing platform, X.com, is wrong.
Right.
Demonstrably wrong.
Right. They haven't saved $55 billion yet.
No. So, I mean, and this is, look, I mean, we had 4 years of Biden. Now we're going to have 4 years of Trump, Musk, and Vance. This is the norm. All right. So, and that, you know, obviously it's up to us to, you know, cut through with our own proverbial chainsaws, cut through the performative art.
And Sophia, related to that, when Elon Musk says he's going to check with the president about sending out checks based on Doge-related savings, it strikes me as whether those checks ever actually arrive or not, the very idea of it pressurizes the politics around this because the Trump supporters say, hey, we might get something out of this. And if they don't, they're not going to blame the president. Trump supporters, they're not going to blame Elon Musk. They're going to blame Democratic attorneys generals in various states. They're going to blame maybe Democrats in Congress or judges, somebody else. And Trump will still win politically, even if the checks don't go out.
Right. And so, I mean,
it's designed that way.
I mean, remember, this, for the Doge check to work,
Right.
It has to go through Congress.
Right.
Congress has to authorize this really as a spending.
Right.
You know, and I think I was just on the Hill today talking to some Republican
What
senators.
were they telling you?
Look, a lot of them have said when there are DOGE savings, all of it should go toward paying down our national debt. And that is their first priority. So, you know, Elon Musk and Trump might have their ideas for what the DOGE savings should do. They might be creative, but if you ask the people who are actually in charge of authorizing something like that, you know, they disagree.
And Tom, to your point a moment ago, that the savings are less than advertised, why is it that we can say that with such confidence?
Well, because, look, there's a history already of making statements and from the White House. And in this regard, Elon Musk is a member of staff on the White House.
Yep.
He is Russ Vought. It's years past, we would be talking about Mitch Daniels, budget director of the W White House, you know, Jared Bernstein, you name it. This is staff and the White House misstating subscriptions, all right, referring to lobbyists as media.
Right.
Now, has been quite a blurring of the lines of that recently, but this White House in particular has a long history of stating things inaccurately. You know, what their intentions are, we can't live inside their heads, but they get a lot of things wrong on purpose repeatedly.
And Sophia, how important do you think it is that Mitch McConnell is ending his political career effectively right now in light of what has transformed beneath his political feet with the Trumpian Republican Party?
Yeah, so, I mean, look, I think take what Trump has said about Mitch McConnell recently, I think in response to his no votes to some of Trump's nominees. I think Trump largely sees Mitch McConnell as irrelevant. You know, of course, this
is
someone...
As a defeated force within the Republican Party.
Yes, and, you know, but this is someone who was reelected 6 times. He was elected 7 times, the longest serving leader of the Senate. And that does mean something, but that also tells you where the party is.
And Tom, it's worth pointing out, if it's not for Mitch McConnell, Merrick Garland gets a hearing and possibly a confirmation vote and sits on the Supreme Court. He doesn't. That elevates the issue of the future of the Supreme Court in the 2016 race to Donald Trump's benefit. And then Merrick Garland becomes Attorney General in a Biden administration, and lots of things flow from that. I mean, Mitch McConnell is central to a great part of the early success of Donald Trump.
Yes, it's votes against nominees in the tail end of his long career and very powerful career don't change the fact that, I mean, he shaped the court. He shaped the court which in Trump v. U.S. expanded presidential powers. He shaped the court, you know, look, the second impeachment for the January 6th insurrection, he, you know, tamped down the indictment vote.
The conviction vote, absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, I mean, look, he has been incredibly consequential, probably not in the ways that he and his staff will say as they're wrapping things up.
Yeah, Trump may regard him rhetorically now as irrelevant, but he was very relevant at very key points in Donald Trump's rise to the White House and while he was there. Tom LoBianco, Sophia Kai, thank you very much. Appreciate it. So there's a movement, as you probably have heard, among Democrats, not just here in Washington, but nationwide, to push back at some level or another on President Trump's agenda. Democrats, of course, are in the majority here in Washington, so Democratic governors may be more visible in mounting that opposition. We're going to find out what they're saying about the new administration. That's next, right here on America Decides. Welcome back. Thanks for hanging out with us. President Trump set to speak tonight at the Republican Governors Association annual winter meeting here in Washington. Simultaneously, there's the bipartisan National Governors Association meeting. The president won't be there, but I bet he's going to be a focus of some conversation, especially from Democratic governors who have a lot to say about the president.
President Donald Trump tweeted, "Long live the king." I'm here to say New York hasn't labored under a king in over 250 years. And we are not We sure as hell are not going to start now.
Let me give credit to the Trump administration. We have seen FEMA operating just like they did in the previous storms and tornadoes we faced. We are getting full cooperation right now, and our declaration got turned around by the president in near record time.
Two Democratic governors there, Kathy Hochul from New York, Andy Beshear of Kentucky. Ophira Yehezkel joins me now. She is the Director of External Affairs for the Democratic Governors Association. It's great to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Major.
What is the state of Democratic governors and their orientation to the early and aggressive actions from the Trump administration?
Well, I'd say many of them come to Washington for the National Governors Association meeting on the heels of having just laid out proposals to make life more affordable for the people in their states. And I think they come to a Washington controlled by Republicans who seem focused on doing the exact opposite. Trump said on day one that he was going to be focused on cutting costs. And I think Democratic governors are really the folks actually trying to deliver on those results and deliver those promises for the folks in their states. And so I think what they're looking for is some place that they can find agreement on, some place that they can find some agreement where they can deliver results for folks back home. And I think they're hoping that in meeting with President Trump, folks can find those areas to land on.
Republican senators and even some Republican members of the House are beginning to say they're getting calls back home about federal workers laid off or fears of being laid off. Are Democratic governors getting that same pushback, and are they bringing their concerns here?
Absolutely. There are total concerns about what these layoffs mean for folks in their states. I think you just heard from Governor Beshear talking about what FEMA looks like. Obviously want that sort of
praising FEMA's efforts.
Praising FEMA, and obviously want that sort of disaster response to maintain at the same level. We have a governor's race this year in Virginia. Folks there are, I think, even more disproportionately impacted by the prospect of federal layoffs, could have a direct impact on Virginia's economy. That's personal, and I think voters have told us in the last election that that's what they want governors and particularly folks in federal office to focus on, is bringing down those costs, making sure the economy is working for them. And it seems like it's in direct contrast to what the voters asked for.
Speaking for the Democratic Governors Association, you have to deal with Republican criticism, and I'm looking at something that they put out, our Republican National Committee, in September 2024, saying that of the top 15 states with the lowest unemployment rates, 11 are led by Republican governors. Of the 10 states with the highest unemployment rates, 7 are led by Democratic governors. You know this is a long-running Republican allegation that Republican governors create more jobs, better economic climate, better business growth for their states than Democratic governors.
I simply don't think that's true, Major. I think Democratic governors are laser focused on bringing in jobs to their states. Governor Beshear, who you just highlighted, has brought in record job growth to the Commonwealth of Kentucky, is a Democratic governor in a typically held Republican state. And I think all of our governors are laying out economic proposals like tax cuts, which you typically hear from Republicans. They're focused on making housing more affordable. They're the ones who are talking about how they're going to make progress for folks in their daily lives. And what we're hearing from Republicans is the exact opposite. They're talking about cutting critical programs that would impact people's health care, their ability to put food on the table. And I think the other contrast here is that Democratic governors are really protecting people's freedoms. That's something that we heard loud and clear from voters that they wanted to see. And that's been a winning combination, as we've seen on the statewide level, in electing Democratic governors. We've got a great number of them who I think are really the path forward for our party and really able to deliver results for people in their states and are working hard to do it. And I think the contrast here in Washington is on pretty clear display here for NGA.
Ophira Yehezkel with the Democratic Governors Association. Thanks for being here. I appreciate it very much.
Is it safe to fly?
So the simple answer is yes, it's safe to fly, of course. Actually, I'm going to fly later today.
With recent air safety incidents stunning Americans and possibly the world at large, can the Transportation Department here in Washington afford budget cuts of any kind? Well, we asked the Transportation Secretary that very question. His answer next, right here on America Decides. Welcome back. On his first full day as Transportation Secretary, Sean Duffy faced the deadliest U.S. aviation accident in more than 20 years. The midair collision of a commercial jet and an Army Black Hawk helicopter over Reagan National Airport here in Washington killed 67 people. And just this week, a flight crash landed in Toronto. All 80 passengers we are happy to say, survived. Our Chris Van Cleve spoke with the Transportation Secretary about these incidents as well as recent layoffs at the Federal Aviation Administration.
Does it make sense to make cuts at a safety agency that has so much on its plate?
So, first off, this was a Canadian crash, right? American airline. But let me just put it into context.
But there have been 5 incidents in the last 3 weeks.
So let's be clear. Yeah. There's a safety organization, but all the critical safety positions like air traffic controllers and inspectors, all of those positions have been protected. No one's been fired. Actually, we're hiring into those spaces, not cutting, hiring.
Will there be future rounds of cuts?
Listen, there could be. I'm not sure at the FAA, but I think across government. The president's made it clear he wants a more efficient government, a smaller government, a more responsive government. So we'll see how that impacts DOT and FAA specifically.
Does that make it harder to hire some of those safety critical positions?
No. Listen, people want to work. Listen, people are mission driven, right? So we're a safety organization, as you mentioned. People want to work in this building, in the towers across the country. They have to get trained up. But no, I think there's a real drive to be part of the mission. This, again, going back to safety, I think DOT had a lot of priorities that wasn't safety. We're bringing it back to safety, and I think people are motivated by that and want to come in and be part of the movement.
How do you avoid the potential conflicts of interest with Elon Musk, given that SpaceX is regulated by the FAA? He's been critical of the FAA, and his companies are a big user of FAA-controlled airspace.
Yeah, so I was very conscious of anyone who comes in. I don't want to see conflicts of interest. So he was talking to air traffic controllers, didn't plug into the system, but looked at the terminals that they use, the technology that they use, asked them, had a back and forth about what works well for you, what doesn't work well. And they spoke freely about these are the problems that we have. And so it was nothing about the way that SpaceX uses the airspace. It was about how do controllers do their job, what kind of technology do they have. And so again, not plugging in, not deciding policy at the FAA. It's, again, how can we improve the technology around the stations that you use to control the airspace?
Is there any indication that you've seen so far that DEI practices factored into this accident?
In which one?
The DC one, but in any.
I'll be specific on things that I want to talk about. I don't want to. There's some spaces I don't want to go into, but I'll just tell you that the one DEI office that DOT had was at FAA. That's now gone. There was a lot of practices that were in place. There was focus on language at the FAA. We had to change the phrase cockpit to flight deck. They changed notice to airman to notice to air mission. Focusing on language as opposed to focusing on safety goes to show you that people didn't understand the mission, that we keep people safe here.
Our Chris Van Cleve with Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy. Finally, it is National Love Your Pet Day, in case you did not know. And that got us wondering about presidents who have had, well, pets around their White House or with their children or sort of running around the area. So, question arose, which president had the most animals in the White House? The answer, Teddy Roosevelt, 26th president of the United States, had this, counted 48 pets while he was in the White House. I'm going to check my notes here because I looked this up. They included a small bear, a lizard, a pig, a badger, a hyena, and yes, even a one-legged rooster. Next in that list, Calvin Coolidge, 29 pets, George Washington, 26. You can look up their varieties. More recently, President Biden had 3 German Shepherds, Champ, Commander, you remember it, so do I, Major, though his tenure was short-lived. Not because he died, he just got a little out of hand. During President Trump's first term, the White House was pet-free. And so far, we have yet to see any pets in the Trump White House this second time around. That does it for today. We'll be back with another edition of America Decides tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern. The Daily Report, that starts right now.